Since childhood, I've heard stories about Hercules, labors, feats, almost inhuman strength. But the older I get, the more it all feels distant, almost decorative. I wonder why this figure crossed the centuries. And more importantly, what, beyond monsters and victories, is still worth passing on?
Perhaps because what you call Hercules is already a later transformation. The Greeks spoke of Heracles, not a triumphant hero, but a man subjected to trials he neither chose nor caused. For them, the labors were not achievements to admire, but situations to be understood. And one of them, in particular, hardly resembles what we usually call heroism.
You mean the cleansing of the Augean Stables? That is the labor that troubles me most. 30 years of filth left untouched. How can cleaning stables be considered heroic? Slaying monsters, I understand. But this is the kind of task given to those no one looks at.
And that is precisely why the Greeks saw it as the deepest trial. 30 years without cleaning is no longer simple dirt. It becomes stratified, layer upon layer, compressed into structure. And think of this. For 30 years, people walked past those stables every day. They saw them, they smelled them, and then they grew accustomed. What lasts long enough eventually begins to look like the natural order of things.
So the real problem isn't the filth itself, but the fact that it became invisible. What you're describing sounds like silent erosion, knowledge no longer transmitted, standards slowly abandoned, the courage to think sacrificed for comfort, until mediocrity becomes the norm and we forget that something else was ever possible. Those are our modern stables.
Exactly. The Augean Stables are not a place. They are a condition. They reveal time's most dangerous work, normalization. Disorder that lasts long enough stops being perceived as disorder. It becomes scenery, fate. And that is what terrified the Greeks. Not violent chaos, but inertia disguised as stability.
Then why Heracles? He didn't create the mess. He didn't benefit from it. He had never even entered those stables before. Why burden an outsider with repairing what others allowed to rot?
Because the myth does not seek a culprit. It seeks capacity. There comes a moment when the question is no longer, who caused this, but who can act now? Heracles is not chosen because he owes repair. He is chosen because he can act without waiting for justice to be acknowledged, without convincing himself his task is noble, without confusing necessity with fairness. He acts, not because it is just, but because not acting would be worse.
And yet he doesn't clean with his hands. He doesn't exhaust himself in sheer effort. He diverts rivers, as if rejecting heroic suffering in favor of structural transformation.
Because the myth rejects the lie of martyrdom. You can try to empty the ocean with a bucket. Suffer. Be admired. The ocean will remain. Some disorders are too old, too vast, too structural to be corrected by individual virtue. The myth does not glorify effort. It glorifies the lever.
And still he succeeds. The stables are clean, yet Augeas refuses to reward him. He minimizes the work, questions its legitimacy. Why end the story this way?
Because the myth was never meant to comfort. Those who allowed disorder to persist are often the first to diminish the work of those who correct it. Tragic heroism is acting, knowing no one will say thank you, knowing your method may be criticized, and doing it anyway, not because it is fair, but because it is necessary